Hi, I'm Bernicia Gentle, and welcome to another episode of The Gentle Perspective. Please click the subscribe button below, leave a like, and of course, feel free to comment. In this episode, I'll be talking to Dr. Philip Castillo, an economist and lecturer at the University of Belize, in relation to the current economic standing of Belize. Now, as uninteresting as it may sound, we all need to know the magnitude of the impact this can have on our daily lives, our country, and our region. So the hot button issue currently is the back and forth in relation to the public sector wage bill. But before one immerses themselves completely into the discussion, we have to remember that economics is actually a social science. This means that you will come across various ideologies, approaches, concepts, and conclusions. With that, it is imperative to have several opinions because one wrong move may allow us to end up like Jamaica. But we'll get into that further in just a bit. Now you may be wondering, what exactly does the term public sector wage bill even mean? Well, here's Dr. Castillo with a clearer breakdown of that.
If you look at the data that the government itself has produced, if we are told that we spend $450 million annually on paying on salaries, wages and salaries. No, obviously government does not have that kind of money. Given COVID and the collapse of the tourism sector, government does not have that kind of money. So what government has been doing to meet its wage bill is simply borrowing. And when we say borrowing, we mean borrowing from the central bank, which is tantamount to printing money. So we have been printing money to pay our public sector.
In 2020, the US Federal Reserve resorted to printing new US currency notes in an effort to tackle the economic downfall of the coronavirus. Let's translate this to us here in Belize and the borrowing of funds from the central bank, which, you guessed it, equates to printing new money. Now, initially, I thought about the legalities of this concept, but there may be more far reaching consequences than that.
The government of Belize has the rights to the Belizean currency. So we could print Belize dollars as much as we want. The problem with that in a small economy such as ours is that our economy is also import dependent. So for example, then government prints money and pays you your salary. You take your salary and you run to Brody's or any one of the shops and you buy things. Now, those things in Brody's are mostly imported. If you go to Brody's, you would see possibly 90 or 95% of the things there are imported. So at some point, Brody's need to use your Belizean dollars that you spend to buy US currency or to find the US currency so that it can replace or restock its shelves. No, that is the challenge because government of Belize cannot print US dollars. We could only print Belize dollars. So what you have then, you have an abundance of Belize dollars in the system and a shortage of US currency. Now the huge problem with that is that you will have Belizean dollars chasing scarce US dollars, which means that right now the US dollar as a commodity is priced at 2 Belize to 1 US. But if you have lots of Belizean dollars and there are too few US dollars, then you are prepared to bid up the price of the US currency from 2 to 1 to 3 to 1 to 4 to 1, etc. That is a de facto devaluation. Now, the reason why persons are talking about salary cuts is that that is by far the fastest, the most immediate way of reducing your expenditure. Because yes, you are to focus on revenue enhancements, but things like introducing new taxes take a while. You have to go to the parliament and get approval and those kind of things. And taxes change how people behave. So it means then that the most immediate thing that you can do to reduce your expenditures is to simply cut salaries, because salaries is by far the biggest component of your expenditures.
But Dr. Castillo, is that sustainable enough? Yes, we know it's the fastest, but don't you think that cutting something that was described by the World Bank as being the social protection safety net would cause more harm than good?
Well, you want to cut in a way that you protect those who are most vulnerable. So, for example, then, where salaries are concerned, if you've listened to the news recently, you've heard of some Belizeans with some huge salaries. In this country, minimum wage is about $3 and something per hour, which works out to about 20 something dollars per week. The average monthly income in Belize is $1,164 per month. That is the average monthly income in Belize, which means that the average annual income in Belize is around $12,000. Obviously, you do not want to cut at that level, but suppose you're earning in the region of 80, 90, $100,000 per annum with benefits, then there's scope to cut there, because a 10% cut from somebody who's earning 1,164, that is far more meaningful to that person than say a 10% cut from somebody who's earning 80 or 90,000. So what you want to do then, you may want to not cut at the lower levels and then cut higher at the higher levels. That is feasible. You may want to do that.
So all of this culminates to the country still being in a surmountable amount of debt. How do you pay back if you're still borrowing every day just to sustain the country?
Well, we have two kinds of indebtedness. We have our external indebtedness, where we owe people abroad. We borrow those monies in US currency. So we are obligated to pay back in US currency. We can't pay Belizean dollars to somebody who we owe abroad, because Belizean dollars are meaningless abroad, they're worthless abroad. That's our external debt. And then we have our internal debt, where we borrow monies from central bank in Belize currency.
Now, when looking at possible similarities, for example, Jamaica, how similar of a position are we in when it comes to the IMF report and also the subsequent strifes of COVID? How do we correlate with their landscape, their economic landscape?
Well, Jamaica is ahead of us in lots of ways. And then we saw some of the mistakes that they did. And then that puts us in a position where we could rectify. If you see somebody ahead of you, a person is making mistakes, then obviously you are to learn. One of the issues with Jamaica is that, again, the huge size of their public sector. They had a huge public sector. Um, they obviously are trying to address that now. The finance minister, Dr. Nigel Clark, is doing his best efforts to try to address that, to focus on what is called reducing the fiscal deficit. Um, we need to do those same things.
So there you have it. The uphill climb of being able to effectively cut back while still being responsible to our economy and faithful to our debt obligation. In part 2 of this episode, we'll talk about the other member of this story ride up the creek without a paddle, Jamaica. But until then, thanks for watching, and kindly click the subscribe link below, leave a like, and share your comments. Until part 2, stay safe.